Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new La Dispute record, The Rooms of the House. These guys are a Michigan band, 10 years going strong. This is their third full-length LP, and over the years they have evolved to become one of the most idiosyncratic bands in emo and post-hardcore, pairing the punk spirit and melodic guitars of these genres with some incredibly vivid and wordy storytelling. And this storytelling really reached a peak in the band's career on their last full-length LP, Wildlife, dropped in 2011, and still remains one of my favorite albums of that year. Grows on me with every listen. Oh God, such a good record. If you haven't heard this record, please freaking listen to this record. Really powerful tales all over this album, backed with some great rock instrumentation. There's a track on here that kind of details the decline and hopeful restoration of a church, losing a child to cancer, the destruction of some teenage kid's life by anti-depression medication, a deadly shooting and then subsequent arrest. Frontman Jordan Dreyer's lyrics and singing are winding, they're powerful, they're loaded with just roller coaster emotions, climaxes, plot twists, and the instrumentation the band conjured to go behind these lyrics felt like they complemented the storyline of these tracks at every shift in gear that was made. It's not like listening to a rock band cycle through a simple series of verses and choruses. And even though all the tales laden into these songs are different, it is the themes of emotional exorcism and catharsis and metaphorically getting things off of the chest that brings a lot of these tracks together and leaves this album feeling kind of like a concept or very thematic. Now La Dispute is back with a new full-length record, Rooms of the House, and on this LP it seems that the band continues to take underground rock music and apply very dramatic, wordy, thought-provoking lyrics, stories, poems to it. But there are some somewhat obvious changes that La Dispute presents. For example, this is the band's shortest full-length LP so far, and is a little more concise than the records they have put out in the past. There's not a single song on here that approaches the 5-minute mark, and there are a few tracks on this LP as well that have faintly catchy and very straightforward guitar riffs or chords. On a lot of songs here, instrumentally anyway, La Dispute is no longer indulging in these winding, evolving pieces of rock music. In fact, there are a handful of songs on this LP that instrumentally are kind of subdued, which in one breath is kind of disappointing, but in another, I do think that has led to Rooms of the House being the most varied La Dispute record to date. Take the kind of subdued, hypnotic drum beat hanging in the background on the track Woman in Mirror, the strung out guitars and the sort of lax spoken word vocals seem faintly Slint-esque on this song. And then there's the song Extraordinary Dinner Party, which opens up with this winning set of melodic chords that, if it wasn't in this track, I think could have played well into an old school Dinosaur Jr. song. Production-wise, La Dispute sounds roughly the same. There are quite a few tracks on here where the guitars are noticeably louder than they have been on previous LPs. And I would say with any other band, that could have been a great thing. But in this particular instance, it makes, at least on some songs to me, especially the second track here, it makes the lyrics, it makes the vocals so much more difficult to read, to make out. There are moments where I really think it makes them kind of unintelligible. And again, for any other band, that might not necessarily be a horrible thing, but for La Dispute, the lyrics just carry the songs so much. It seems like the spotlight on this record, even more than usual, is being shifted away from Jeremy and to the characters that he's singing about. It's, again, a very slight change, not big enough to signify a huge variation in the band's sound, which could be a good or a bad thing with Rooms of the House, because for some coming into this record, it may seem like La Dispute is just kind of putting together a by the numbers sort of LP, which I understand could be kind of a hard feeling to avoid considering how unique and specific La Dispute's sound is. And on top of that, any changes they make to their usual sound could seem really great. Sort of like the downstroked, slow, and kind of punky guitar chords on the track The Mayor in Splitsville. Outside of the context of this record, when I was first exposed to this song, and many other people too, it seemed like this track could have been a grab for a poppier sound, or even an attempt at just a stronger element of accessibility. But in the context of the record, I do like the song a lot more, and I do kind of see these guitar chords kicking off the first verse of the album as sort of reclaiming a rock love song cliche. Because as the song progresses, it does reveal some really great chord progressions and pretty explosive moments too. Now, like La Dispute's last album, this LP too seems to just kind of be a mixed bag of different tales. However, these don't feel strung together by the same themes of incredible, emotional, and sometimes physical trauma. Still, it does not make this LP any less powerful as it kicks off with the track Hudsonville, Michigan, 1956. A song that sets a scene with a woman who's in Indiana, her husband is over in Michigan, there's a tornado, there's a storm, she's shuffling the kids downstairs for shelter, there's a bulletin over the radio. The song gets really intense, as does the track 35, a song that I believe is actually referenced on this opening track here. And on this track, Jeremy gives us a view of this incredible car accident involving many vehicles and people falling to their demise on a bridge that seems to give way. It seems that this incredibly horrific event is actually a bit of a centerpiece on this record. I actually think this record's King Park, if you will, and it is referenced on the song Stay Happy There as well, as the narrator of this track is sort of contemplating this relationship he's seeing demise in front of him, thinking about everything that could have been in the future, whether or not that everything occurred in the past throughout this relationship was sort of a waste of time. However, there are some tales on this record that do not feel quite as grand in topic, but it doesn't seem like the band puts any less effort into the storytelling or doesn't try to put any less urgency into the instrumentation. For example, Scenes from Highways from 1981 to 2009, which seems to contain a lot of intimate reflections on the past with this particular character that we're following on this record. And while this track and no other track on here as well don't feel like a huge disappointment to me, it's very clear that this record overall is not quite as elaborate or as extravagant as La Dispute's past two full-length LPs. The gap here isn't huge, but it's noticeable. And I think it's due to the band's more concise approach on this record. I feel like they are trying to make their instrumentation a little more straightforward on these tracks and a little louder, a little brighter, a little punchier, and yet they don't try to alter their lyrical approach significantly. And I think what they've ended up is just trying to put 10 pounds of magic inside of a 5-pound bag. To me, this kind of lyricism and this kind of instrumentation needs more space, needs more time. It does not need a really hooky, looped drum beat. It does not need a really obvious attempt to try to pull everything together on the closing track, which, while conceptually interesting, is kind of an anticlimactic finish. And it doesn't necessarily need slightly louder guitars either. Overall, I do think that this is a very good record from La Dispute, but I didn't come out of this thing as infatuated with it as I have been with their two previous records. Still, there are plenty of clever metaphors on this LP and allegory involving rooms, houses, moving furniture, material things, a dying relationship, and of course there are a few detours as well into personal and widespread disaster. I'm feeling a decent to strong 7 on this thing. Transition, if you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you? Maybe you hated it. Well, why? And what do you think I should review next? Anthony Fantano, La Dispute, forever.